Hi, Troy Love.
Hello, how are you, Tammy?
Good. Long time no see. We had a meeting yesterday, so it's been a whole day. But anyway, because we've got more stuff that's coming.
Yes.
We're always thinking about new options, so stay tuned. There's more coming. So for those of you joining us live, if you've got questions, type them in the Q&A. But any thoughts on your mind today, Troy?
So I just got an email from somebody who I have Finding Peace 5-day challenge that's available on my website. It's
Which
free.
is, what's your
Troy,
website?
TroyLLove.com. You can sign up and you get a little video every day for 5 days that explains this process that you and I talk about. And the person just sent me feedback that it's been a couple. She said she got it a couple of months ago, and the second and third day were the hardest. And the second day is really challenging the core core beliefs that we have that are attached to the wounds that we have. And she said it was hard because often those messages didn't come internally. They came from what was told to her or us by other people. And my response to her was, yeah, that is the challenge with these core beliefs. Because oftentimes as children, if you talk to a child, they think they're pretty amazing. even teenagers, sometimes when I talk to them and I'm like, how's shame going on? I don't have shame. I'm amazing. I'm like, wow, that is so awesome. I'm so glad that you feel like that. Somehow that shifts for a lot of us. But just so those were some of my thoughts as I was thinking about today, and just the challenge that it is when those three genres of core beliefs get wired in. The genre of I'm not enough, there's my identity, there's something wrong with me, I'm flawed, I'm defective, I'm bad, or the genre about safety and trust, or how we see the world, like the world is unsafe, I can't depend on other people to show up for me, people are not trustworthy, or the genre of powerlessness, where there's nothing I can do, I'm doomed, it's going to be like this forever. Those three genres in particular can be really devastating for us in our attempt to find more peace and connection and overcome the challenges that we have. And I continue to look for ways to rewrite and rewire them. But the first step is even having an awareness that that's a core belief that I've been holding on to, and how does it serve me? And why do I continue to believe it when I have evidence to the contrary? And why do I continue to look for evidence to support it when it's not serving me? So just asking some of those questions is part of what we do every day. So.
Well, and I think, understanding that those are external, like there are certain messages, as soon as I say that, I go, oh, and I identify the person's voice, I go, oh, that's that person. And so having the ability to just go, oh, and that gives me a pause so that I can look at what's really going on and why did I go to that, spot immediately, et cetera, too. So a lot of this, as part of the rewiring, in my opinion, it is, we have to understand what we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. And if we can identify those things, then we can look at it with our executive brain, with our thinking part, instead of the emotional and reacting part, which is where, it's so easy if it's getting poked, right. I want to go to the the hurt, the pain, yeah. And that's immediately into reaction and emotion. So,
yeah. Well, we would love to, if you have any questions. I see that we have about 30 people with us today so far, and we're kind of open-ended. I mean, I can always talk about things, but if you have questions about attachment or codependence or addiction, Tammy and I will do our best to answer that within the lens that I work, which is this attachment style, attachment work that I do. For me, it's the fundamental foundation of addiction. And and the codependence and what's happening. These attachment wounds are at the foundation of why people end up turning to sex or drugs or food or whatever it is that they turn to as a way of trying to deal with the pain of their past. And so it's not pathological. I mean, oftentimes in the past, we've really made addiction pathological and we've criminalized it in a lot of ways. But for me, it's not pathological as much as it has been an attempt to try and get our needs met. That sometimes the behaviors do cause harm and and hurt other people, and those actions may be illegal. But the attempt to try and get the needs met and the wounds soothed, to me, isn't pathological. It's just not working very well, and there might be more effective ways of healing those wounds than what we've been trying.
I've shared with a number of people. I mean, honestly, you start hearing some very complex trauma, neglect, abandonment, some really problematic behaviors at early ages. And I have said, thank goodness you became an addict. That probably saved you, because, that's that protective, dissociative place to go to,
Right.
because there wasn't safety, there wasn't support, there wasn't caring. So now it's maladaptive, now it's turning around and biting. But that was what that person developed at a young age, just to kind of manage through a non-safe environment. So,
Yeah.
but yes, I agree with you. Then, like, okay, how can we do life differently? What do we need to learn? And that isn't magically going to happen. You can't go, oh, now I understand, and now I'm going to do life differently. It really is a growth process. Like, even the person that you shared, was struggling with day 2 and day 3. Well, but they're in the struggle, and that's
Right.
how we learn and grow and develop. So just sticking our heads in the sand and going, this is who I am, that is kind of fatalistic. So
Yeah. If you would like to ask us a question, the easiest way to do that is using the question tab down at the bottom of your screen. You can send it through chat, but it's a little more difficult for us to manage that. You're more than welcome to talk to us through chat. We have both windows open, but the easiest way for us to know what your questions are is if you ask them through the question and answer box down at the bottom of your screen. So would love to have that.
And we have a bunch of people here. I can't believe that we don't have somebody that's got a burning question that's going, I just want to know about this. So so I'm going to ask you, because we often have people in relationships that are experiencing wounding, and they're different wounds. So for example, let's say an addict is experiencing abandonment wound, and now the partner is getting wounded as well, and there's a betrayal wound. Or so how do we navigate two people that are struggling with wounds at the same time? Like, how do we help ourselves and the relationship?
So that's a beautiful question. Part of it is changing our paradigm a little bit. And I think you see this as well as I do, when especially the common word is D-Day, when the partner discovers that this thing has been happening, and oftentimes been happening for a long time, but didn't know about it. That wound of betrayal is so fresh and so raw that it's overwhelming for them. And immediately those three core beliefs that get tied to that, well, my identity, well, is there something wrong with me? Am I flawed? Am I not pretty enough? Did I not do this or that enough? And therefore, is that why this is happening? How do I trust you? I don't even know who you are anymore. You don't feel safe anymore. And then this huge sense of powerlessness for the betrayed partner. Like, those three core beliefs are very much running behind the scenes now, as they are hurting. And the addict is also dealing with, well, I'm a horrible person. It wasn't you. This wasn't about you. I'm a horrible person. I'm not sure that I can reach out to anybody for support, and I'm powerless. Like, so we got these two core belief things going on at the same time, and figuring out, well, how do you come together, which is the question that you're asking. Well, how do we do that? If we're able to do that from a place of understanding that we are both hurting, and we can have compassion, and it's hard. Like, I'm not saying this is easy. Like, there's no magic. I mean, I have a magic wand back there, but it don't work. It's not easy, but to be able to have compassion for my wounds and the wounds of my partner is a easier place for that to go. I get that right at the beginning. It's so hard to do that because my wounds, it's like, you think about when I'm in if I was in the hospital, I'm healing from something. I'm not really that compassionate about anything else that's going on in the world. I don't really care. I just want to get better so I can get on with my freaking life. And that's kind of the same philosophy, the same thing that's happening when this is happening. But what I find is helpful, especially as I've worked with couples, is that when we start to see like, oh, these wounds are not wrapped up in my identity, but these wounds are definitely part of my painful journey and your painful journey. How can I have compassion for and empathy for your wounds and take ownership for my role in what I do that bumps up against that actually really does bring a couple together in some really beautiful, profound ways. And in that process, it actually makes it easier for the addict to be more honest. They don't feel like they have to lie because they're afraid if I tell you, I'm just going to reopen your wounds. They're able to be more open and honest. The partner's able to also be more open and honest and say, let me tell you, like, this is how this is affecting me, without the judgment and the anger place. And together, they then can create an environment where the wounds can begin to heal, versus what we usually do, which is we blame and we protest and we escape and we do those kind of things in our woundedness and try to avoid the pain. It's more
I think
theoretical. Yeah, that's
yeah,
theoretical. I didn't give skills, but
yeah, no, but I think it's so true. And, a betrayed partner is going, you hurt me. I mean, and that's true. Like you and your behavior hurt me. But I have a lot of partners who are also able to say, my betrayer person is, has deep wounds. And so when they're able to hold that, complex, yes, this person hurt me, but they were also hurt. I do think that they can start to see a path to going, okay, we both need to work on our wounds, and having support separately, and probably can't be the most supportive of each other, at least initially. It takes, some time to develop, that, and to be in a place, where you have the external support too. But yeah, I mean, that ends up being, I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they were talking about what's going on, and it's terribly painful for both of them. And there's a lot of screaming and yelling and, shame and, I mean, and so then it's not helpful for anybody. They're venting, but it's really not moving anything forward, and probably causing more, hurts and shame and everything else. So getting qualified professional help, this is not a DIY project. So getting the right help and support is really, important. So next question. Hi, how much of the past does a partner have the right to know? I'm assuming this is about like disclosure stuff. So
that's a good question. The part of it is, well, how much do you want to know? A lot of times couples will say, we don't have any secrets between us, and that would be great. So when it comes to full disclosure, and it comes to like, especially like, this is there's a big answer to your beautiful question. It depends. Like, are you asking like what happened before your relationship started? Which I'm guessing that's not what you're asking, but like, are you asking like what happened before you two met? And then are you asking of like how much has happened in the relationship? And that's because of each person's situation being a little bit different. That's why we really do recommend that you have a CSAT or a qualified therapist who's understanding the full disclosure process for both partners to kind of help you walk through this process. Like Tammy said, it's not a DIY.
DIY.
Yeah,
Do it
DIY.
yourself.
Yeah. And I've seen those go pretty not well. But
Constantly.
but the question is like you're asking about the right. When we're doing full disclosure, I'm always telling the addict, don't leave anything out. Now there might be like specific details that I think might be really harmful and damaging to the partner. And so like what color dress or something that the person was wearing, or those kind of things. But even that is not a black and white answer. Like there might be a legitimate reason why the partner needs to know that particular piece of information. And so there's a dialogue that's happening between the partner and the therapist as we are figuring out, well, what would be helpful, and help us understand what is around that. Is that part, getting that answer, will that help heal that wound for you or give you some clarity around it? Or is it going to actually open the wound even further? So if I can't give you a black and white answer for your question, you have the right to know the truth. Maybe not all the nitty-gritty details around the truth, but you have the right to know the truth because you need to be able to make a decision based on those truths that will help you move forward in whatever direction that is. So hopefully I answer that as well as I can. You have the right to know the truth.
Yeah, but I agree, not the gory details. I mean, I get calls often from partners who are so stuck because they know, and now every location, they're walking down the street, and is that a person that would be, and I'm going to use his and her, but his arousal template. I mean, all of those type of things. You deserve to know if it's somebody you're going to see, like it's a family member, a friend, all of those type. If it's happened in your house, I mean, that type of thing. But I have heard partners want to know what position and what, like body part size and all of that. And then it's always the comparison. And so you have the right to know, but you also have the right for safety and not to be further traumatized. So it is a delicate balance of, finding the right, you should know if you need to go get an STD test. I mean, your health, those type of things you absolutely do. I've had both, with people learning about what happened before their relationship, because sometimes those patterns preceded the relationship. They were doing that, this is the second marriage and they did the same thing in their first marriage or whatever. And for some people, having some information on that, it's helped to clarify and understand the pattern across. Other people have gone, I just need to know about what's happened, during our relationship. So I think it really does. I've shared this before too. Dr. Rob does a peer case consultation group every week for professionals. What's the number one topic? Disclosure. It didn't come up yesterday, but every week, I swear, other than that, it comes up on some level, because it's a difficult it's a difficult process, even for those who've been trained in it. So making sure you're getting the right support to have, if the goal of disclosure is to have a foundation of trust on which to build to move the relationship forward, you want to have it go well. You don't want to be further traumatized, but you don't want him or her to leave out information. But it also is a synopsis. Dr. Rob talks about, these are a 2-page, this is not 20-page narrative where you're glazed over listening to, traumatic details. So having the right help, it helps you move forward. So again, not a black and white answer to a complicated question. Okay, next question. Isn't addiction a treatable pathology? Perhaps we don't like that word because it carries so much stigma. Is it okay to say it's a pathology that can be resolved in the same way a physical illness can? It doesn't even have to be chronic. Oh, this is chronic. This is like the ASAM, the American Society of Addiction Medicine. It's a chronic condition. And I've been around long enough. I can tell you the people that don't take this seriously, and treated as a chronic condition are the ones that relapse even after 20 years. So is it a pathology?
So I know the person who's asking this, and it's
Uh,
I think he's amazing, just by the way. And so it's interesting. I looked it up because I get preview to these questions. Pathology means it's the treating of a disease. The medical definition of it is that we're treating it as a disease. And a lot of people look at addiction from the lens of the disease model, right? And they go after it that way, and some people don't. As I was sitting with this question, and I look at it from an attachment perspective, ASAM says like addiction is a brain disorder. We have rewired our brain, so it is a brain disorder. So in that way, I guess it's a medical issue. And I look at it from a wounds perspective, and I use wounds from a medical perspective, even though you can't see them. You can't see rejection wounds and abandonment wounds and betrayal wounds, but they're very much there. And so we treat them the way that I talk about it, we're treating it that way. And from that perspective, I guess that would fit with the term pathology from like the medical terminology of it. I guess what I meant was that it's not criminal. And the way that our culture in the United States particularly has dealt with addiction over the years is they criminalized it. So maybe that was a better word for what I meant, is like it's criminalized. And and I'm not here to like have a political debate about it. I'm just saying that what I mean from that is that there is stigma that comes behind that, when at the very bottom of all of this is that there's a person who is suffering. People get up in arms because they want to say, well, you're just excusing it. And it's not an excuse. It's like, okay, once you know what's going on, you now have a responsibility to do something about it. So it's not an excuse to say, okay, well, you can continue on your behavior and not look at how it causes harm. And the 12-step model is beautiful when we do the 4th and 5th step, and the 7th, 8th, and 9th step, as we're looking at how our behaviors have hurt other people, but not from there's something seriously wrong with you perspective of, but there's something that's hurting, and let's see what we can do to help heal it and build healthier connections and make the world a better place.
Yeah, and I, deeply wounding. I find people react to the label of addict or whatever, and I was like, it was such a relief to me, because otherwise the behavior I was exhibiting was completely crazy. Why would I keep doing things that hurt myself and others? I had no reason for it, and I couldn't stop it until I got the tools to be able to use to do it. Things carry stigma, but my behavior carried stigma. The things I was doing were like, it was problematic, and hurtful. So to me, having a place to go that could help me learn to do life differently, be a contributing member of society, I'm not hurting myself or others, that's a good thing. You said it's not an excuse. I say that often. It's not an excuse, it's a reason. And until we have the tools to be able to do something different, we don't. And unfortunately, too many people are given some information, given a choice, and still choose to continue in their act of addiction. So and we can keep being here, reaching out a hand, but at the end of the day, everybody gets to choose. So. Next question. I'm the betrayed partner who has had to walk away after 2 years since discovery. I did my work. He didn't do his. Yet he goes to his meetings and offers super relationship advice to everyone else. Why can't addicts help others? Or why can addicts help others but cannot take their own advice? And why do they push their supportive partner away, treating them like the enemy? I wonder if he was treating me so badly that I had to walk away and he didn't have to make the decision.
That's a possibility. As I'm reading that, I'm thinking, yeah, I give really great advice as a therapist. And then I look at my life and like, why am I not following my own dang advice sometimes? So I'm always looking at what am I living congruently? Am I living in integrity myself? So that's the question I always have to ask myself as a human being, about what counsel do I give to others, and am I actually following through on that? For you, it sounds like you needed to make a decision that was right for you in walking away and helping you feel peace. And yet when that happens, there is a wound of loss that happens as this relationship is changing and it's not the same. And we go through some of the steps of loss, just like when we do when somebody dies, where we are trying to understand, like, this didn't have to happen. Like, this could have been changed if only. And at the end of the day, we only can work with what we're dealing with and our decisions. And it's sad, like, because it didn't maybe need to be how it turned it out. It sounds like you have a lot of insight as to what is going on, and the heaviness that you had to be put on your shoulders to make a decision that maybe he wasn't willing or able to be honest about is heavy. And I just want to tell you, I honor you. I feel the sadness that's coming, and I'm hoping that as you continue to move on your journey, you find peace and love, and somebody who just thinks you are the most amazing person on the planet and treats you with dignity and respect and is honest with you as you continue in your journey. If that's something you want, and if not, if you don't want another relationship, that's cool too. Just hoping that you know that you are worthy of love and belonging regardless.
Yeah, and I hope you're really clear that you're not the enemy. This is, I was thinking how sad for him, that because he can't be happy, joyous, and free. He knows he's being incongruent. He knows that his words do not match his actions. We talk about, walking the walk, not just talking the talk, and so he's the one that's losing out. He lost you. So I our thinking is screwed up. We can learn to do life differently, but we have to keep working on it. And it sounds like he is not willing to do the self-examination. It's just way more fun to tell everybody else how to live their lives, rather than work on himself. So but I like Troy said, I honor that you made the difficult decision. And yeah, it may be, I mean, Dr. Rob does private consultations, and it's amazing how many of them are just looking for someone to make the decision and say the words, because they are not able to say, I want to leave this relationship. So but I hope you have support. I hope you have freedom. But I know there's grief and loss with that too. So glad you're here. Betrayed spouse here. My husband has read your book, attends your drop-in group occasionally, and has watched your webinars, but he still doesn't understand the shadows of shame. Is there anything that would help him out with it? Coming
Well,
soon.
yeah, we are working on a class for that, with Seeking Integrity. He can also email me if he needs questions about that. Because of the vagueness, like, I don't know what part of the shadows of shame he doesn't understand. I have met some people that they just can't wrap their head around it. They really can't, and that's okay. The analogies may not work for everybody, and that's fine. The biggest thing that I try to help people understand when we're dealing with the shadows of shame is that they are the thoughts that have been in your head, and I've just given them names and made them look like whatever you want them to look like. And then I'm able to pull them out of my head and put them somewhere around the room and then have a conversation with them. But oftentimes when I'm teaching these concepts, people still when they talk, and they're like talking about the judge, for example, they're still using I, like, I'm a horrible person, I haven't done enough, I'm not perfect. And then I say, okay, all I want you to do is change the pronoun from I to you, and move that outside of your body, and just imagine that somebody else was saying that to you. You are not good enough, you're not trying hard enough. And that sometimes clicks for people. We're like, oh, yeah. And then I'm like, okay, so who does that sound like? Where have you gotten some of those messages from in your past? And that kind of turns the light bulb on for some people, that they're able to do that. So just changing the pronoun a little bit sometimes is helpful in being able to just understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the shadows of shame. I've learned a lot about them since I wrote the book, and I've understood a lot more how they work. So it's if you hang out with me a little bit, and if he is coming to the meetings, he probably can do that well. But I understand a little bit more about how they work now than I explain in the book as well. So, but if he has questions, I will do my best to answer them. You can reach out and I'll do my best to respond that way. Hopefully that was helpful.
Well, and I will throw a little teaser out here. We are working, we have the work groups for Sex Addiction 101, levels 1, 2, and 3. We have got Porn Addiction 101, levels 1 and 2. We've got Couples Healing from Betrayal work groups. So all of these work groups are on the seekingintegrity.com site. They're 6-week courses, and they're specific. So there's teaching in there, and they're limited, but there's interaction with a facilitator. And we are working on, offering an attachment wound. We don't have the exact name of or anything. I expect it to be available by the beginning of next year, but it would be, we intend another 6-week course to delve into on a little more personal. It's not therapy, it's not treatment, but to be able to do that specific work and create peer groups to support each other around that. So stay tuned. More will be posted on the site. Okay. So what type of couples therapy should we seek out, given that we have and are both doing our own therapy for some time now and need some help as a couple?
Again, because I don't know your particular situation, I can't say, and every therapist kind of has their own idea about that. I'll give you an example. I had a couple that there is a betrayal that has happened. The individual, the husband had an affair. It was a one-time thing. He doesn't actually fit the definition of having a sex addiction. But as I was sitting with them, it became very clear that he was also very suicidal. And so I was like, we cannot do couples therapy until you are emotionally stable, because the last thing we need is for you to go complete suicide and add more pain into this. And so I made the decision to recommend that he come see me for individual, and that his wife go see another therapist for some individual, and then just check in like once a month as a couple until we could get him a little bit more stabilized. And the wife had expressed some sadness about that, because she really had come because she really wants to fix the marriage. And I'm like, I get it, totally get it. And I'm not hoping to do this for indefinitely, but we do need to work on some of these things that we're working on for that. So that's kind of an example of what's going on in the head of a therapist as they're trying to figure out, like, okay, should we jump into couples counseling right now? Where are we with individual? And so it's very different for every case. There are some times that we just jump right into couples. The couples have done enough work and have enough awareness that they can own a little bit of their own behavior, and so we can jump right into couples therapy. And sometimes we put a pause on that as if something comes up. So I like the type of therapy that I do for couples is emotionally focused couples therapy that was founded by Sue Johnson. It's one of the most highly researched couples therapy that exists on the planet. Is not the only kind of couples. John Gottman has his own brand of therapy, and I use a lot of his stuff in the work that we do with that. So, and again, I worked with attachment theory, so I'm always looking at, well, what's going on underneath that. So if you're looking for a therapist, I would look for somebody who understands attachment theory to some extent, and they may not understand my work around wounds, that's fine, but like attachment theory and how it works, using some of Sue Johnson, you can go to uh, just like ITAP has a list of the CSATs. It's like ICE EFT. You can find therapists who are EFT trained therapists as well, who can do that, understand that attachment kind of thing. And it's interesting, the more CSATs that I work with, the more of them also embrace Sue Johnson's EFT work. So you might find a CSAT who's also an EFT therapist.
That would be my first choice for you. But the other thing often your individual therapists can help guide that process. They can recommend either a couples therapist or they can do conjoint. I know a number of therapists who do conjoint couples work. So each of you have your own therapist, and then on a whatever regular basis, the four of you meet. So you each have your support, and then they're seeing also the dynamic of how you're interacting, et cetera. So that can be really helpful. But otherwise, making sure that the couples therapist has the releases so that they can talk to your individual therapist, because a couples therapist, the relationship, the coupleship is the client, not either of you, it's the relationship. So there's boundaries. Dr. Sue Johnson did a podcast, as has Troy Love, with Dr. Rob on sex, love, and addiction podcast series. So if you haven't listened to that one, you may want to check that particular episode out as well. So but I think having both trainings, being of this world is really helpful, so that they understand the addiction piece as well as, as the focus on the relationship. So, okay, this is a challenging one, Troy. How do I get past ruminating on how could he be doing this to me? Married 45 years, together since 16, 5.5 years since D-Day, 14 relapses. Last one in April. He came out as bisexual, cheated since dating. We have a post-nup 3 years ago to keep my inheritance. Decided to divorce in May. He says he loved me, will take care of me as I'm disabled. He walked away June 1st, stopped income, blocked me from communication. Now taking my inheritance through a loophole. I'm in shock, stuck emotions.
I'm hearing a lot of pain there. My first thought is I hope you have a good lawyer who can help navigate through the legal stuff that's going on there. But your question is, how do you get past the rumination of how he could be doing this to me? And this is a tough one for a lot of ways. And it's an understandable question. I've shared before, so there's this this model of transcendence that I've explained, where at the bottom, we're in this victim state, where very much it feels like people are doing these things to me. I've been neglected, I've been rejected, I've been betrayed, I've been abused. And that is usually where we end up at the beginning when we are looking at these wounds and kind of what's happening. The challenge is that we can't heal in that victim state. And I love that you're asking the question, because I think that you understand that and you're trying to figure out how to change that thought. And so as we have to move out of that and say, I'm choosing no longer to be the victim anymore. And so the way that you could flip that question around is, what am I going to do to not let this happen anymore? So rather than asking the question of how could he be doing this to me, we're flipping it around and no longer being in that place of impotent one. That's the shadow that really amplifies that. Like there's nothing you can do. It's never going to get any better. You just need to lay down and take it, to saying, what can I do to make sure that this is not going to happen anymore? I'm not going to allow this happen. And that's where the legal part comes in. So just flipping that question around is part of how you can maybe stop the ruminating. It doesn't change the pain. Like the pain is real. And so we need to do some wound care, but challenging the question. As we move up a little bit, the next one, and that's a little harder, is how have I inflicted wounds on other people? How have I rejected other people, betrayed other people, all of those things? And I don't like that. I don't like that stage at all because it's really yucky. But I have to own my part. Like, what part of this is mine? And I get, like, when we're dealing with trauma, there's this hesitancy to own that or even talk about that because we just want to like kick the other person to the curb and make it all about them. There is ownership that we have to own in our own life if we're going to heal. And that's heavy. And so what part of this is mine to own, not to blame and not to judge and not to let the judge beat you up over the head and tell you that you suck because of this, but it's like, what part of this is mine? What am I going to do about it? And then as we do that, we transcend to this place of, I'm going to make the world a better place. I am going to do what I can to make my relationships with the people that I love full of love and support and light and hope. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to be mindful of that from that transcendent time. There's no timeline of how that works, but as we're moving up through the journey, that's what it looks like. And that's what I'm hearing you're wanting. And part of that is like, so how do I stop judging him? How do I stop blaming him? It may be too soon because you're still right in the middle of legal battles with all of that. And so finding support, talking to other people. In the long term, though, it's going to be, how do I let him go? How do I let him go and not hold on to this because it's not serving me anymore? It's a journey. I hope that you have some support and know that you are worthy of love and belonging. I can hear, like, there's a lot of stuff going on in your life with the disability and other things, and my heart hurts with you. Short answer is figure out, how can I flip that question around? How can I do something about this and use the energy for that rather than how can he be doing this to me? Just flipping a couple of words in the sentence and then taking that and running with that. Your brain likes to find solutions to problems. So if you ask a different question, it might help you move forward a little bit.
This is a really hard one, and like I'm choked up. I mean, it hurts that, you know, he is doing such horrible things. But I agree. I mean, I in fact, it poked my betrayal wounds, because like I I'm thinking of something that was terribly painful and nowhere near. I mean, it wasn't any kind of comparison, but I had to do a lot of work to understand that I had to look for gratitude. I had to I had nightmares. I mean, like it was really painful. So but as I was trying to process through things, but I had to keep looking at what is still good in my day, who are safe relationships for me. I had to lean into those things. And the more I connected to to those positive things, it helped to not have all of it be overshadowing and negatively affecting all aspects of my life. Like you're saying, your brain is looking for something, and I think it was latching on to anything that was a positive. So I didn't, so I wasn't in the this is all horrible, I've got no control, and it's always going to be this way, because I am pretty quick to go to the it's always, it's never, and that doesn't serve me well either. So I hope that you're leaning into the betrayed partner groups on sexandrelationshiphealing.com as well, and have support outside, obviously, of him. So next question, you said comparison, is that an attachment-based wound?
It is a shadow. It's a shadow of shame. It comes from the wounds. So rejection, abandonment, betrayal, all the things. It comes from those. And what the judge does is it says, well, if you could just be more like so and so, then you wouldn't be rejected as much. If you could just be more like so and so, nobody would abandon you. So it's the wounds are loss, neglect, rejection, abandonment, betrayal, and abuse. Those are the 6 wounds. But the way that shame hijacks that is using comparison. Somebody, I don't know who said it, but comparison is the thief of joy. And the judge really likes to use comparison a lot, just comparing you to everybody. Like, why couldn't you be more like this person? If you were more like this person, then the bad things wouldn't have happened to you. And it's bullcrap. It's not true. The judge is just saying that because it thinks that if it can motivate you to be different, then you won't get hurt anymore. And it's just like, that's not true. I know some really amazing, beautiful people who have rejection wounds. So what you're telling me is not true. So, is that helpful?
Yeah, well, yeah, and I was thinking, because I can always compare myself and find myself coming up short. So, the inferiority or whatever. So, or the grandiosity. I mean, and both of those are not helpful. So, okay. So next question. I'm struggling and have physically gotten sick. So much betrayal, abuse, abandonment, and rejection. And rejection is my biggest wound. So much fear. Would DBT help? So DBT is a type of therapy. So what are your thoughts, Troy?
DBT was originally used for individuals who have borderline personality disorder. And it's really interesting. I just finished teaching a class for ASU on diagnosis, and there is now a argument as they are updating the next diagnostic statistical manual about whether by borderline personality disorder is actually a disorder, because DBT has been so effective in treating people with borderline personality disorder that when they use it, they don't have borderline personality disorder. So how can it be a personality disorder if we can treat it? Which is really interesting. But DBT, the tools of DBT are really helpful regardless of whether you have borderline personality disorder or not. What it does is it teaches you to kind of, they call it the wise mind and regulating emotions. So on one side, we have like the shadowy stuff, like all the emotional, like there's a ton of emotion on that side, and then the logical mind, and figuring out how do we create a balance between the two. And there's a lot of skills that go with it. But in the end, like learning how to not get caught up on all the emotion all the time, but also being able to think through and use the prefrontal cortex and regulate our emotions at the same time is what DBT teaches. And so it is beneficial. I use a lot of the skills of DBT with my clients who don't have borderline personality disorder, because it does a really great job of helping them regulate the distress that happens when their wounds are hit.
I hear you with I know so many partners who, there should be a study, because like my suspicion is, that the chronic post-traumatic stress, the physical, and we know this already, the hormone levels, cortisol, all of those things are negative for a body. So physically getting sick, there lots of chronic conditions physically manifested for partners. So doing anything that you can help regulate your physical self, so that so that you have a chance of not just being sick. But I would love to see the study, because I hear this all the time, and I believe that is true. So the mindfulness things, anything that getting support. I mean, just talking to supportive people, can be, take it down a couple notches too. So. Okay, next question. I feel I am traumatized for the trauma I caused my wife. I feel I won't ever want to hurt her again. It's been a year since I cut all addiction and working on changing my life. Is it possible that realizing the trauma I caused to my partner would make me afraid to go back to my addiction?
So I can get that you are traumatized because you are looking at the destructiveness of your behavior. And part of what I'm hearing in what you're saying is that there's a lot of shame around what you've done. And what the judge will do with that is just like hold you hostage to all the behaviors that you ever did and say like, look, you are a despicable human being. Look at all the ways that you've hurt your partner, and all those things. Shame does not rebuild connections. Shame does not help you make amends. Shame does not help actually motivate your behavior. Brene Brown in her research around shame says it can motivate behavior momentarily, but not long-term. So you're asking, is it possible that realizing the trauma that you caused to your wife can make you afraid to go back? I think recognizing the trauma you've caused to your wife can be an incentive to say, hey, I don't want to do that anymore. That's not who I am. That's not what I believe in. And that can be a huge part of the motivation for why you want to stay sober. It absolutely can be. If you're doing it from a shame-based perspective, that won't last. If you're doing it from a loving, empathic response, that can be profoundly beautiful. And that's really why in the 12-step program, the 7th, 8th, and 9th step are making amends, asking for forgiveness, making restitution for the things that we've done that have caused people to do that. You can't do that from sitting in shame. You can only do that when you are able to sit with owning it and then having empathy, which is different.
Yeah, and I agree. I was thinking the same thing. It won't last. The other thing is it's really easy to turn to another form of acting out because you still don't have the coping skills. So if you have been actively engaged in the recovery process, and working on gaining new tools to use like the 12 steps, et cetera, then yeah, it can be somewhat motivating, but it can't be the only thing in my opinion. Again, I often see, people who switch, so well, I'm not doing that, but I'm drinking, I'm eating, cannabis has been a huge thing. We've got more people using cannabis every day, you're zoning out again. So finding the healthy ways, the outer circle things, on your relapse prevention plan, that's where it comes together. And also being I'm always fearful, that's negative energy to me in the relationship too. So how do you to come together to be equals? Because otherwise, if you always are in the I've hurt her, and then it's hard to come together as a partnership and move forward. So okay, the next is a series of questions. I feel like some of my attachment wounds have been hard for me to pin down. I went through the attachment wound section of Finding Peace. I checked a lot of the rejection boxes, but have trouble figuring out how that was a wound. I feel like things have happened to me that weren't a huge deal in hindsight, but I still ended up as a sex addict with serious, talkative, and influential shame shadows. So I'm having trouble reverse engineering myself and finding out where the wound is and how to heal it. I watched a lot of porn as a 12-year-old and had experiences with girls toying with me during 8th grade, for instance. In reflection, I wonder how could that have created this crazy wildfire I'm dealing with 20 years later?
Beautiful question. Thank you for asking. So you identified, you checked off a lot of rejection. And then what I'm hearing you do is you're kind of minimizing it. To me, it's helpful to identify the wounds, but sometimes they overlap. I'm hearing that you were doing some stuff when you were 12, so you were watching a lot of porn. And so I'm wondering what was going on in your life that's what a 12-year-old had to turn to in order to soothe some of the wounds that were going on with them. So it sounds like you've identified rejection as a big one. There might be others like neglect that might also be happening. Rejection happens when you're being told by others that there's something wrong with you, that you're not wanted, that you don't belong. So that can happen from parents, but often it will happen from like peers, especially growing up. So being bullied and those kind of things, where you're given a message that you're not enough. Neglect can happen where the parents are providing the basic necessities of life, but they don't actually show up when you need them emotionally. So not knowing exactly your whole story, but hearing that, you started numbing these things when you were 12, 13 years old, maybe just stumbling upon it, but beginning to do that pretty early on gives me a clue that there were probably some deeper rejection or some attachment wounds that are going on. And one of the struggles that people have around that is that they don't want to blame anybody. And I don't want you to blame anybody, because blame doesn't actually help anything. They don't want to talk badly about their parents. They don't want to do like all those things. And it's not about that. It's like, okay, you have a wound and it was big, and let's take a look at how maybe it was created. But more importantly, what are we going to do about it today? So you've identified that you checked off a lot of rejection wound boxes in the workbook. How does rejection show up for you today? And does the judge play a significant role in that? Because nowadays we can reject ourselves just more than anybody else has the power to do. Our judge can just beat us up so bad. So how does the rejection wound show up today in your relationship with your wife or your partner, in your relationship with your coworkers at work? Like, how does that show up today? And what do you need around that wound of rejection so we can heal it?
And I keyed in on I'm having trouble reverse engineering myself. And I was like, I don't think I could ever reverse engineer myself. I need help from others, therapists, qualified therapists, the peer group, because like Troy was saying, I read the I'm minimizing, they weren't a big deal. That's just not a big deal. Everybody's got that. That was normal. But having people go, no, wait, that was a big deal. And, I think you will find in working with professional and peers that's how we 12 step is reverse engineering our lives. I mean, that is like we're doing completely opposite of what we naturally gravitate towards. So I would encourage you to get the help in the support of shifting those things. So last question. I listened to someone with a severe mental disorder, an aware person who has been diagnosed and has been in treatment. He is totally aware of what he is and does, but he says that if he does not get emotional reactions, attention from other people outside of him, the creature comes out, meaning thoughts of worthlessness, powerlessness, torturing him, that he is nothing but really compelling thoughts. Aren't those just shame voices?
Yes, in my words, that's what I call them. Other therapists may call them something else. But yeah, those are absolutely what happens when his wound of rejection gets stirred up. Who shows up? The judge beats him up inside, tells him how worthless he is, and then he doesn't know how to regulate that yet. So part of that is learning how to develop shame resilience and learning how to say, oh, I see you talking to me, and knowing what we're going to do about that in a different way that's more healthy and adaptive to what we need in our life.
Well, and I'm thinking, the shame resilience, yeah, because I'm like, if he is immediately triggered every single time something, that the monster, the creature comes out, it's like, what does he need to do? Like I have shared this before. If I'm too hungry, angry, lonely, tired, stressed, I am going to be more vulnerable to those shame voices. So what do I need to do to make sure I'm taking care of myself, that I'm doing my recovery work so that I have more resilience, that I don't immediately go to, to those deep wounds. And then being able to identify them and go, oh yeah, that's that judge telling me that I'm worthless, but I'm not, and here's why, and having, when I first got into recovery, I had to carry I had to carry some stuff around, you know, like my gratitude list. I had to carry things around with me that if I started feeling vulnerable, I pulled that stuff out, you know, including a phone list, including the, I mean, like the serenity prayer, whatever I needed. But there were things I had, you know, that I like, if I was feeling something, I could quick grab that and start shifting things. It was a visual reminder that, you know, I don't have to go to the creature. So so I hope that this person, you know, is working towards getting more resiliency. There are tools to use. There is support. Troy has a drop-in group for betrayed partners on Thursdays, alternating Thursdays at 11 a.m. Every Friday, he's working with guys on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, you know, on attachment wounds. And we have a work group coming. So, but join us again the fourth week of the month. Troy's here next week. We've got a new person coming for the first week of the month. So stay tuned for that. Scott and I will be on next week. And as always, more resources on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. And thank you, as always, Troy, for being here this week. So talk
Thanks for
soon.
having me.
Bye-bye,
All right.
everybody.
Bye.